What would you say to someone who's watching this video? Maybe they're thinking about it, or someone who's looking at the sales page is like, I don't know. What would be your honest thing that you would say to them?
To me, and what's funny is that some people have reached out asking about
Oh yeah, I know.
like on LinkedIn, like a couple people
funny.
are like, I see you in this program. I mean, the return on investment to me is just, it's a no-brainer, because this is a business that you're going to be able to open. You're going to be able to open it faster. You're going to have the confidence to charge higher fees. If you're interested in integrative psychiatry and you want any support in this process, it's a no-brainer. That's just the best I can come up with, because the return on investment is absolutely there. It's one of the best decisions I made in starting my practice, for sure.
Hey, Jess, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
So let's start with little intros before we get into our convo. So people probably know who I am from watching, they're probably watching this on my YouTube. Alana Miller, integrative psychiatrist. I have a career mentorship program where I teach how to start an integrative private practice for clinicians. Maybe give like a one-liner on who you are.
Sure. I'm Jess Romeo. I'm a psych nurse practitioner and a clinical social worker with a private practice in Maryland.
As a side note, I was mispronouncing your last name for this whole time when I was talking.
Most people do. Most people do. They don't seem to believe it can be Romeo.
That's simple.
There's a lot.
Like it's that simple. It's not
You have
Romeo
to commit to the stress on that first syllable.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like Romeo and Juliet. I think I saw that on your website or whatever. I'm like, okay, now I'm saying it correctly. So maybe to start, can you tell people, we know each other because you're in my program. Maybe to start, how did that get to be that you're in my program? How did you come across my stuff and how did you end up joining?
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to start a private practice at some point. And I've just been a person who's learned a lot of things on YouTube over the years. Like I'll search YouTube for different things. As I was thinking about starting a private practice, there were some people who were kind of already in this space talking about it. But when I found your stuff on YouTube and started reading more of your content, it really resonated with me in a way that other people's information just didn't. Your philosophy really made a lot of sense. And so I just kept reading more and eventually decided to join.
I'm actually curious about that. Just out of curiosity, what was different about my content versus other people's? What resonated in particular with mine?
First of all, it was more clever.
Thank you.
More clever and specific about what the steps were to a practice. And I don't know, since I have this dual experience of being a social worker and a prescribing provider, integrative psychiatry is just a great fit for that. You were able to voice a lot of things that were already a practice philosophy of mine, but you said it better than I could have said it in a lot of ways. So it was like, this is a person that has a similar philosophy to me, has a really great way of articulating that and communicating that. And it seems like this is the practice I'd like to build. The kind of practice I'd like to build.
Yeah, totally. I've had other people mention that to me too, coming into my program saying like, well, it just seems like you had the kind of practice I eventually wanted to have. So you seem like someone I'd want to learn from. I do think that's a good heuristic. I always try to find, when it comes to like skills I'm trying to learn, who else is doing it and is there an opportunity to learn from them?
Absolutely.
So tell me, how long ago was it that you joined and where was your career like at that time?
Yeah, so I joined in, I think it was April of 2022. And where I was at that point, I was then like 3 years out of nurse practitioner school, and I was working at a large community health center where I was seeing anywhere between 15 and 25 patients a day for the short 15 or 20-minute follow-ups, and was getting really burned out. Knew that I had to start building an exit strategy, but I didn't know exactly what kind of practice I wanted to build, or much less all of the multiple decisions you have to make along the way. So that's where I was when I found you, and it was a really great community to just dive into.
I actually remember you telling me about your job on our initial call, and I think I said something like, now I know why you want to start a private practice.
I remember when I was on the call. So I took a risk in doing this program and starting the practice as early as I did, because some people watching this might know of the large like loan repayment opportunities that are out there through HRSA.
Yeah.
And I worked at a HRSA site and was in the process of applying for loan repayment, which meant a 2-year or 4-year contract with that job. And at the time that I had to sign the contract, I decided not to, because I had started my practice. I realized that would have meant the only way that would have paid off would be if my practice wasn't successful. And once I had been in the program, even for a little bit, just being able to build an entrepreneurial spirit, that was clearly the wrong decision. So there was a lot of evolution that happened from our call to then, being in the program a few months later, making some of these choices.
That's interesting. I actually want to dive into that a little bit because it's something I don't even really know. People come into my program and then I see them on the calls and stuff. Now we do more like direct personalized coaching, like onboarding calls and stuff. But otherwise, I don't necessarily know what people's internal experience is always, like those initial, I assume there's a little bit of an internal evolution because I purposely build those first modules talking about transitioning your mindset into not being just the clinician, like the clinician hat, but also putting on the entrepreneur hat. What was like the mindset shift that happened just in maybe those very beginning stages for you?
I just started to get excited about what was possible. I was telling this to my wife recently that till starting the practice and having this experience, it's hard to envision the sort of limitless possibilities that actually are out there in being an entrepreneur. Really, until your program, I hadn't had the opportunity to sort of dream in those ways. It sounds kind of silly and cheesy, but it really is true.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can really describe this shift of just sort of an opening to what's possible.
That's exciting. I mean, I find entrepreneurship so energizing, not to say that there's never any stress associated with it. If anything, I'd say it's a little bit of a trade-off of there's these really high highs, but then sometimes like stressors or lows, but then you build something that you own. It's your thing and you're not beholden to a boss who's just going to say, oh yeah, how you've been having 30 minutes for appointments. Now you get 15. Oh, now we're just changing your contract. Now you have to do XYZ. So the trade-off is really worth it. And as a side note, not to go into like a whole tangent, but I put that poll on the forum recently asking like, what made you want to go into private practice or why do you do this? And I was actually surprised that basically everyone voted autonomy. I put like 6 options, like autonomy, financial abundance, dreams of larger businesses, flexible schedule. And I thought there'd be maybe like even match between those things, but basically everyone voted for autonomy. And I think it just goes to show why a lot of us get frustrated in the jobs, like the one that you had. You want to provide good patient care, but you often literally can't in the confines of those systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's 2 things that led to autonomy being this major factor. So one is these systems are broken, right? I started getting really burned out with, okay, what can I do in 10 minutes? Right? Having to ask yourself that over and over every day gets really discouraging. It leads to like moral injury among healthcare providers. And 2, I know some of the research that they've done into what some of the factors are related to burnout is when you have a job that has both high expectations and low control. And I think that's where healthcare is really headed, and practitioners are kind of really facing the intersection of those 2 things. So I'm all about autonomy. It's great.
So tell me a little bit about kind of after those initial steps, you started going through the program, started building your practice. How did that all go? What was that process like for you?
It's a bit of a blur.
It's a bit of a blur.
But there was just so much energy behind it. I mean, the program was really helpful. Like all the content was incredibly useful to like building the idea and then thinking about more of the details. Most of all, it was exciting. I remember just listening to a lot of the modules. And you did a really great job with having assignments sort of in the right places. So we could not only like passively take information in, but I was really like producing, okay, what is it that I would want to put on a website? What is it that I would want to do? And since I was so energized for an exit strategy and to get this thing built, I was willing to follow whatever feedback somebody, that a mentor would give me. So I just remember really feeling like I was working really hard, but I wanted to be. And it felt really productive and useful. And I wasn't alone was the biggest key. That was really helpful to not be alone in it.
Yeah, totally. Tell me a little bit about how being a part of the community has been for you. Because people maybe don't know, the program has there's different features of it. There's some pre-recorded content and homework assignments and lessons. There's Q&A, like live Q&A calls we do, but then also this community forum that has like 140 people on it almost now. How has that been for you being a part of that?
That part is just really invaluable. And it's grown even so much since I joined. I think there were 30 people around the time.
That's right.
It's over 100. Even then, when it was fewer people, just knowing that when I had a question about something, there was a whole group of people who were doing the same thing, many of whom had already made the decision that I was trying to think about how I wanted to make it. And to be able to just put something in the forum or save something for the next mentorship call, as opposed to agonizing about it alone for weeks, months, right? Like that kind of thing is just invaluable in terms of a time saver, just a stress reducer. So I think the community aspect was really huge.
And talk a little bit about the niche for your practice, because you have kind of a unique niche in terms of patients that you see.
Yeah. I'm a trans-identified person, and there are honestly not a lot of people in a prescribing role in mental health who have that lived experience. And so, in doing some of the work with the website, I think you and admins there, like you and Kate, helped give me the confidence to lean into that a bit and say, this is unique about you. There are things about you that will make people want to see just you. And I don't think I would have been as confident in that without the program. I have a practice that is mostly adults, and technically 10 and up, but I specialize in working with people who are on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. So a lot of queer and trans folks. I work with trauma, especially secondary to minority stress, a lot of anxiety disorders, ADHD, and a fair amount of autism. Because once you work with a lot of queer and trans folks, you realize there's a really strong overlap between gender diversity and autism. So that's what my practice looks like. Those are the issues that I focus in on. I see about 30 to 35 people a week. I have about a 25 clinical hour week, and I'm pretty much full in about a year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So let's talk about some of the numbers. So wait, you say those numbers again of how many patients you see in a week?
Sure. Between 30 and 40, usually around 35 patients a week, 25 clinical hours at most.
Got it.
I would say I do mostly 30-minute med management visits. A lot of my folks have a therapist, but I do some therapy. It's about 25% of my folks are both.
Yeah. And you're unique in that you're a licensed clinical social worker from prior to getting your PMHMP degree. And so I know I talked to a lot of psychiatrists, but especially psych MPs who feel not comfortable doing therapy. But then I also try to, and maybe you can comment, maybe you have the same opinion as me, or maybe a different opinion, but that I think being helpful in a therapeutic way is not rocket science. And I think that as long as you're not trying to do psychoanalysis or something without training, doing basic supportive therapy, basic CBT, maybe starting with selecting easy or more straightforward patients, and then getting supervision, you can learn therapy too as you're building a practice.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the case. And I empathize with a lot of nurse practitioners because I'm aware of the difference between clinical social work therapy training and nurse practitioner therapy training. It's very different. I got way more training as a social worker. But I do think, it really is like just about anything else. When you learn by doing, and if you take it slowly and you have good clinical judgment around, this is a fairly simple case, let me try it with this person, then you can build those skills without practicing outside your competency.
Yes, exactly. Like you practice within your competency, but build the skills over time. So anyway, I sidetracked us from asking the questions about your numbers. Okay, so around 25 clinical hours. Do you feel comfortable talking about revenue numbers? We can cut it out also if you don't.
That would be fine.
So what's like how much money do you make in whether you want to say like a week or a month from about those clinical hours?
Yeah. So from about those clinical hours, I don't have it pulled up right now, but I'm usually somewhere between 6,500 and 8,000 a week usually. Now that my schedule is full, it's at least 25,000 a month, usually closer to 30. And I think it'll be closer to 30 a month from this point forward.
That's amazing. So you work 25 hours a week and you make $25,000 to $30,000 a month. That's like amazing. Okay, so how does that
was possible?
How does that compare to your agency job? Just out of curiosity.
It doesn't. It's not even close. Not even close. I think when you think about the hourly rate at an agency and the fact that you're working for somebody else for those hours, it feels like I'm making 10 times as much. I'm not. But it feels that way because the work it's mine, right? It's my practice. I'm building something. I'm not just laboring for somebody else.
The work's enjoyable. You don't feel like, you're just rushing to get to retirement or something.
Right.
I don't know how you feel. I'm like, I'm going to stop working when I'm dead. I like, not that I'm going to work as many hours as I'm working now, but I want to stay productive and stay sharp. And this is the kind of thing that you can really enjoy and keep with you and not want to just be like looking forward till when you get to stop doing it.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on that since starting the practice, but I do think I understand now people who enjoy working more than 40 hours a week. I didn't get it before.
Yeah.
But I understand it now that so I'm building something on my own. I still want balance there. But I'm definitely working a lot less and making a good bit more in my practice for sure.
Yeah, usually I tell people, and you probably have exceeded what I'm about to say, but I usually tell people you can match what you did in your job working half as many hours. Which is that about accurate, or you may be making more?
No, I think that's about accurate. I think I remember hitting that. I remember hitting those numbers when I was still part-time at the agency job, when I was doing 2 days a week in my private practice, and I was making exactly the same as I had full-time. So that was a big milestone.
Remind me, when you first started, did you cut back your hours, or did you you were full-time for a while and the practice? Right, that's what I remember. Yeah. Okay,
I don't know.
It's a little stressful.
That's, I think, why it's a bit of a blur. I don't know that I would advise staying full time as long as I stayed full time.
Yeah.
But I mean, anxiety about money is very legitimate. The practice wasn't making money as I was starting to build it in those first couple of months because I wasn't seeing patients. No, I think I stayed full time. I started the program in April. I was full time until October. Then I dropped to halftime and I ended up leaving in early February the next year.
Okay, so you were able to completely leave that job 9 months or something after starting my program.
Yeah, and I could have left sooner.
Yeah.
Financially, I could have left sooner. I was too nice to stay for as long as I could.
Yeah. I mean, typically I recommend people to have like a 1 to 3 day a week side job to at least covers your basic expenses. Because if you don't have anything, then it's just too financially stressful. And I find too, people make bad business decisions when they come from a place of like fear of, oh my God, I got to get patients. I'm just going to take on everyone. I'm just going to cut my fees way down. And people lose the thread a little bit on the long-term plan if they have that short-term desperation. So at least having some side work. But yeah, you did it where like you were full-time and then had the practice, but then at least you were able to cut back your hours.
Yeah.
So where do you think your practice would be at now if you hadn't joined my program? Because a lot of people considering my program are going to start a private practice anyway, and they're deciding between, should I just save the money and do this all by myself, or should I pay this money and do this program and, maybe get an ROI? So tell me kind of, I know you're a little bit like guessing, but where do you think you would be now if you hadn't done it, if you hadn't gotten that guidance?
Yeah. I think anybody opening a psychiatry practice is ultimately going to end up being successful. There's such a demand that you will be successful, but I think that it would have taken much longer. First off, I was talking about how quick I could make decisions because you provided a framework and other people had made decisions that helped me like kind of guide my own. So it would have taken longer. I would have charged less because I wouldn't have known that I could increase fees. I wouldn't have had the confidence and support to do that. And it just would have grown more slowly because I think a lot of your advice and support around how to network, how to market, I've grown mostly through word of mouth, but that took a pretty considered network marketing effort.
Right.
And because I knew how to do it really well from some of the templates you provided us, that ended up being really successful. So it would have been successful, but I'd be making less. It would have grown more slowly. I would have been really anxious. And there's a lot of other clinicians I see in private practice who struggle with a lot of questions that I just feel so grateful. Like, oh, I have a forum for this. I can go and ask people about this.
Yeah. Do you know what, too, is that I wrote a newsletter about this recently, that I think you can make almost any mistake in business and starting a private practice and recover from it. It may just take you longer to build. It could take a lot longer. But the one mistake you cannot recover from is giving up. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest benefits to having a supportive community, to getting the support in the program, is that just getting that reassurance you're on the right track. Because I see people who aren't getting help giving up prematurely, like thinking fundamentally that this kind of practice isn't possible, or it's possible for someone else, or it's luck, or it's possible in someone else's geographic area, but not possible in mine, or all these stories. But it's really possible anywhere for anyone. I mean, there's people in my program from basically every single state rate from all sorts of different backgrounds with all sorts of different niches. That's another cool thing too. Like we all have space to use our lived experience, our unique lived experience as a little bit of our special sauce and kind of the patients we help and work with and everything. But there's no way around that there's little doubts and there's 1,000 little decisions. And that can be death by 1,000 paper cuts if you're trying to reinvent the wheel, doing it all by yourself, figuring out all these things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it'd be a really hard journey to take by yourself. I'm not sure how that would have gone.
I'm curious even to like a specific. So you said you probably would have charged less. Can you maybe be specific? What are you charging now versus what do you think you maybe would be charging if you just done it on your own?
The sort of moderate rates in this area would be something like 300 to 400 for an intake, and then 150 under 200 usually for follow-up visits, like 30-minute follow-up visit, which is comparable with what insurance reimbursement is. And I started out charging 450 for intakes and just under 200 for follow-ups. That 2 number was a lot for me for some reason.
Yeah, to overcome the 2. Yeah.
And now my fees are not incredibly much higher than that. So I charge 600 for an intake for an hour and a half, 800 for a 2-hour intake, and then 250 for half-hour follow-ups and 350 for longer. But I also started doing autism assessments since I was seeing a lot more of that. And that is a more $400 an hour process. So that's where I've gotten to. I would not have had the confidence for it at all.
Okay, I did this with Alicia. I want to do some back of the envelope math to calculate what could be like a yearly return on investment. So you said the going rate for an intake was, you said 350 to 400?
Something like that.
And then a follow-up was 150 to 200. Let's say 175, like split the difference.
Yeah.
That's 200, 350. So 350, let's say 350 an hour for the follow-ups. And then you said you're charging what for 30-minute med management?
250.
250. So 500 an hour. So 350 divided by 500. So you would have charged 30% less. And you said let's just say 25K a month times 0.7 times 12. I'm getting an estimate of around 300 grand that you'd be making now, and that it would have been 210 with those lower fees. So 90K extra in a year. I think it's important to put it into context because my program's not cheap. But the way I think about it is that I'm only doing my job if you're making 10 times more than you're spending on it. And you're going to have your practice for the rest of your life. This is an extra 90K you're making a year for every year that you have the practice. And then that's not including kind of the internal or like less tangible benefits of mental reassurance. You're on the right track. Being in a community, getting the inspiration in terms of the entrepreneurial mindset. What would you say to someone who's watching this video? Maybe they're thinking about it, or someone who's looking at the sales page is like, I don't know. What would be your honest thing that you would say to them?
To me, and what's funny is that some people have reached out asking about.
Oh yeah.
Like on LinkedIn, like a couple people are like, I see you in this program. I mean, the return on investment to me is just, it's a no-brainer, because this is a business that you're going to be able to open. You're going to be able to open it faster. You're going to have the confidence to charge higher fees. If you're interested in integrative psychiatry and you want any support in this process, it's a no-brainer. That's just the best I can come up with, because the return on investment is absolutely there. We're just talking about 1 year of 90,000 extra, and 90,000 I think is a conservative estimate. It's one of the best decisions I made in starting my practice for sure.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you joined. Like, this is very sincere, is that it's rewarding when someone joins and like does the steps and is successful. I'm not taking people's money to just have them not be successful or flounder or whatever. I'm taking their money so I can like help them and have it be beneficial. And I sincerely appreciate when someone goes through the steps and executes on the vision, because then it's fun for me to help you bring your practice into fruition that helps a totally different population than I help. You have this totally unique area of expertise that I totally don't have. And then like those patients are getting help that maybe they wouldn't have gotten if you didn't have the reach that you have. People get hesitant to market like it's like a dirty word. Marketing is just making the people you can help aware that you exist. If they don't know you exist, you can't help them. And the world is a better place if you help all the people you have the capacity to help.
No, I 100% agree. The marketing help and also the integrative psychiatry knowledge too has been incredibly useful, because just the philosophy of there being multiple ways of knowing something and the idea of evidence-informed medicine, I think in working with queer and trans people who have very mixed experiences within sort of a Western medicine paradigm, it's really a key philosophy to just hold with those folks and to be able to offer some interventions that are really evidence informed in the integrative realm. It's psychologically really validating for them and practically incredibly useful for improving a lot of their symptoms too.
Yeah, it's good to have more tools in your tool belt than just prescription medication. None of us really enjoys just only throwing medications at every problem, but maybe we don't always feel like we have a ton of the knowledge. Functional lab testing, using nutraceuticals, using mind-body approaches, and getting those skills helps building a practice too, because then it becomes a differentiating factor. You're not just a commodity that's just going to prescribe Prozac like any other psychiatrist. You offer this really unique differentiated service.
Absolutely.
Kind of on the topic of your entrepreneurial vision and kind of how joining my program lit up this new part of your brain in terms of thinking entrepreneurially. You're starting your own program, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that. And I find this is often an inevitable step that any person who really takes on that entrepreneurial identity gets to.
Yeah.
We all fill our practices, right? And then we're like, now what? I want to do the next thing.
Exactly.
So talk about the next thing that you're working on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned as I was starting my practice is, so I filled from like 0 patients to 130 patients is my current panel in 12 months, because there was just a huge vacuum I was filling in terms of trans competent providers. There is just such a need for people who know how to work with trans folks specifically, so trans and gender diverse people, because there's a lot of people who unknowingly cause harm in working with people. And there's a lot of trauma that trans people are coming into appointments with. And so being able to be a trusted provider for this community is a really big deal. And there just are not enough people out there to serve. So given my professional experience and my lived experience as a trans person, I wanted to do something to change that. So I am starting a program to help other mental health clinicians, psychiatrists, NPs, therapists, or coaches as well, like executive functioning coaches or other things, to know the basics and beyond, really like everything you really need to know to be able to not say the wrong thing to a person, to be able to understand where they're coming from and what a lot of the issues are that they're facing, and just be able to really provide excellent care to people.
And tell me a little bit more about why you think this is important, because one of the things we've talked about before, even in the beginning of this call, before we turned on the recording, is that a lot of us who are well-intentioned, like myself included, are maybe saying and doing things we don't realize are turning off our patients who are trans. And it's sometimes a subtle little thing. So why do you think it's important that even if you feel like you're good enough, that getting extra learning on this is valuable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'll give you an example. Like one of the great value adds in your program is sharing some of your forms with us. And that saves so much time. And, when I was looking through the way some of your forms were constructed, I had to change some sections of it because I was like, this isn't going to work for my folks. A lot of times, if you're taking any kind of sexual history or even just trying to understand someone's medical history, there will be a section around for women only, asking about previous pregnancies, menstruation history, because I'm interested in mood symptoms around any hormonal pattern to mood. So it was a really simple fix. You said, okay, for people with menstruation history only. So there are so many small things you can do to make better first impressions, right? To make your forms more inclusive. And the thing is, each one of those things is like a tripwire, right? If a trans patient is coming to you and your website either says something that's not affirming, or you make one of those little mistakes, or the intake forms that you send out, say for women, right?
Yeah.
Those are little indicators that are going to break rapport. And, you could see anything from, wow, this person didn't show up for the intake after I sent the forms. I wonder what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Or, wow, they were really closed off at the intake and didn't really want to tell me much. I wonder what's going on with them. There's so much trauma that people are carrying coming into medical provider offices that we're hyper aware of those mistakes, and showing some effort, making sure forms are inclusive is just one, but a really powerful way to demonstrate that you can be a refuge, you can be a safe space.
It's interesting because, I do think I have on my forms, I used to just say male, female, and then I changed that, but I totally forgot. You're right. I say for women only. I didn't even realize that was something that could turn, I mean, now you said it's obvious, but I think you're right. There's like a gazillion little things that people who don't have that lived experience or clinical experience might just not think of, even if we're well-intentioned. I want to point out too that the fact that you are so equipped to work with this population, I think is a big factor of, like you mentioned, of why you grew so quickly.
Yeah.
You filled a vacuum. Not everyone fills their practice as quickly as you did. And it's amazing like what you've accomplished. And I think a big part of that is that you were able to offer something that actually a lot of people don't know how to do. And it would be pretty simple to learn it from you, and then to be much more effective in building your practice.
Yeah, it absolutely would. I think that's a big reason that it grew as fast as it did. And I mean, the good news about this is for, cisgender, meaning non-trans, or like straight providers, this stuff isn't rocket science, really.
Yeah.
It's small things. It does mean a bit of a paradigm shift that I talk about in my program around how much we're sort of conditioned to see things as a binary, and how much the culture causes us to view things a certain way. So there is a bit of shifting we have to do to start thinking about things from making less assumptions and in a more inclusive way. But once you do that, it is a lot easier to keep it going. And honestly, the biggest catch-22 is that you need to be working with trans people or exposed to trans people to be able to know how to work with trans people.
Yeah.
But if you don't know how to do it, you're never going to get them through the door, because you might do something that is one of those tripwires. So I really want to try and help with that catch-22. And it's similar to, just in time information with a bit of nuance, right? But we still learn by doing, in working with people who are different from us, or like specifically this population. I've learned more from my patients than from my own lived experience and extensive training.
Yeah, I think it's important too, like you said this, that you can be straight, you can be cisgendered and still work with trans patients. You don't have to be afraid of that if you get kind of the right education. Sometimes I talk to people who think they're not allowed to, or something, see patients if they don't have that lived experience, but you absolutely can. It's good to get some additional training or guidance on it.
Yes, you can, and you should.
It's a need.
Yeah, it's a need. It's a huge need. What's hard is that, all the queer and trans providers, they're all booked. They're all completely booked. And when I try to find somebody who's, say, a specialist in OCD, but is also trans-affirming, it's nearly impossible to find someone with openings. But like those little tripwires, I do need to have sort of vetted the person, or know that they've been vetted somewhere else, because they could make a simple mistake that could really ruin rapport. I wonder if I could ask about an example. Actually, I'm just kind of curious. There are some terms that people sort of know, or some that don't. Because there are a lot of things that seem sort of innocuous that well-meaning providers could say, but actually is kind of harmful. So for you, Alana, how would you describe someone's sex that they were born as? Not as they identify, but how would you write that or ask that?
Yeah. And I know that I don't have the right answer, but it's biological sex. But I know it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, and that sounds really reasonable, right? And that doesn't sound harmful at all. Yeah. But the right terminology for that is sex assigned at birth. Yeah. Because it's assigned, right? The first thing that happens to you.
That's a really good point. Do you said something else too on one of our Q&A calls, or one of our conversations, where you were talking to me specifically, you were talking in general, if a provider doesn't have any trans patients, they might be doing something wrong. And I'm like, oh no. Yeah, I feel seen. I have had some, but not that many. And it's not like there's a dearth of trans people, so what am I accidentally doing
Mm-hmm.
that, whether it's on my website or forums or whatever, that I'm losing a population of people that maybe I could otherwise help?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think there's sort of different categories of mistakes, that easy mistakes people can make. There's some that are errors of commission, so actually saying the wrong thing. But I think a lot more often, and I've been doing more research into this in building the program, a lot of it is actually errors of omission. People are too afraid to say the wrong thing, so they just don't put anything on their website. They don't put anything there. And we need a signal that you know a couple of things before we're going to come in and trust you, right? So being able to help people take that first step beyond the anxiety, it's not that you're just saying the wrong things. Like, let me help you to know what the helpful things are to say and how to build a trusting relationship so that when you do make a mistake, we all do, I do, it'll be okay. Like, you can save the rapport because you do enough things right.
Right. Yeah. What I feel like really reassuring about your message and about your offer and kind of the way you're setting up this program is that this isn't rocket science. You can learn this, and just a couple little tweaks could transform your practice, just your practice of psychiatry. And if you have a private practice, really open up a whole area of patients, a vacuum you could potentially fill. Maybe tell a little bit about what you are covering in your program.
Sure. So it's a lot of what we just talked about, right? So a really comprehensive review of what to say, what not to say, why, understanding what people are coming in with, like the trauma that we're coming into the room with, so that you hold space for that. But, I'll also be going over really specific things, like exactly how you can structure your intake forms to have them be the most inclusive. And I'll even offer, direct assistance with it. I'm working with someone who's going to help anybody who's in this program fix their forms. We'll also go over things like what's really common in terms of hormone therapy. What does transition even mean? Because that's a very broad thing. We have this idea of what it might mean, but it's a lot of different things. Gender affirming surgeries are a really common topic because we're still living in a time where to pursue a surgery, people have to see a mental health provider and get a letter confirming that they have the capacity to consent for that procedure. So being able to prepare people for being able to do those assessments and write those letters. And it's interesting, as you go up the scale from like being a coach, being a therapist, to being a prescribing provider, the things you need to know actually to sort of be have good enough knowledge actually increases. Because if you're prescribing and they're on hormones, like there's some basic things that you really do need to know to be prescribing safely for people. So it's really going to go through all of that. I think about, what do I need to be successful working with my patients? What would I need a provider to know to work with me? And that's what's in the program, and helping people communicate that on their websites, on their online presence too.
Yeah, both the tactical clinical knowledge to work effectively with trans patients, but then also some tips on how you can market to them and change your website, changing your external online presence, marketing materials, so that you're attracting those patients, so that you can help them, you can reach them, and you can help them.
Yeah. So we'll do some one-on-one support. I think we'll be doing group mentorship calls as well, because I think people sometimes need to practice, especially if like somebody starts using different pronouns. You need to literally have the words and say the words. And I just want to create a space where people can ask the thing that they're afraid to ask and be able to be in a supportive community. So that's my hope with it as well, that people can start to navigate this with less anxiety, because that's certainly what you offered me in starting my private practice. So I'd like to offer the same space just around a population that I care a lot about. I want us to be able to have access to good care.
And I mean, I remember when we talked about your outline for your program and kind of the reason you were doing it and everything, I was really sincerely inspired. You genuinely care about trans people and you want them to be able to get this kind of care. You're not just doing this program to like make a quick buck or something. You're passionate about having more providers who have these skills, because it's something like you see your community has a massive need for. And wouldn't the world be a better place if there were more people who have the knowledge that you have, replicating what you do in your practice?
Absolutely. Because I think there are a lot of people that have the right heart for it, and they just don't have the knowledge or the right place to get the knowledge. You can get online trainings, but they're very patchworky, and maybe you'll get one piece here and another piece here, but wait, they disagreed on this, so what's the right answer? just being able to have one place to go to get those questions answered and have support. Yeah, it will be a better place. I hope so.
Yeah. And you're very like safe person to ask those like difficult questions
good.
too. You know what I mean? Because like
I'm glad it comes
like,
off that way. I like try
it
to
totally does. Because I think otherwise maybe like straight or cis people would feel afraid to ask a question like it's gonna seem stupid. I've never felt like I couldn't ask or anything was off the table to ask you. You're very warm and genuine about wanting to give people answers and like understanding that us newbies don't have malintent. We just don't know sometimes.
Yeah. And that's not everyone in the trans community, right? And that's valid for some people not to be in that role or feel comfortable in that role. But I don't know, I'm a queer trans guy from Alabama.
Yeah, you had
like
to.
it just
that's right. You're not
just
from New
makes
York
sense.
City.
Just makes sense to me to hold that space. And I think if I can, I should, you know? Because it really feels rewarding to me. It doesn't feel draining to sort of sit with people as they navigate and they struggle and they make a mistake. That doesn't bother me at all. They're here to learn, they're here to get better, and that's going to make the world better. We'll be launching in mid-September. I'm just excited to get it started and to kind of take this next step in my entrepreneurial journey.
If people want to find you and get kind of into your beta group, you'll give me the URL, like the website link, right? And then I'll link to it below this video.
Perfect. Yeah, that works.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this conversation with me. And I'm super excited about your program too. And anything else you want to say before we finish?
I don't think so. No. Thanks for everything you've done. It's made a big difference for my practice and just my career in general.
It's been my pleasure, truly, to have you in my program.
Yeah, thanks, Alana.
All right. Take care. I'll see you soon, Jess.
Thanks.
Bye.